Hi, I'm your host, Olivier Bousset, and welcome to Business Not 101, a podcast that explores the uncommon side of business. In today's Founders interview series, I am joined by Laurence McCahill, co-founder of the Happy Startup School, creating experience, programs, and building an accidental community of like-minded people. Hi, Laurence. Thanks for joining us on Business Not 101.
Thank you, Oliver. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great. Let's start this up. So first question, your 60-second elevator business pitch.
No pressure. So I'm co-founder of the Happy Startup School, and the Happy Startup School is best described as an alternative business school. You know, we see ourselves as an antidote to business as usual. And off the back of starting that almost a decade ago, we've built this accidental community of entrepreneurs who ultimately share our values and our vision for what business can look like, which is really driven by not just money, but also purpose, impact, and happiness. And so with this kind of mix of a tribe and tools and programs that help people get clear on their vision for their business and also do it with others and enjoy that journey too.
Did you guys come up with this idea because it was something that you were building up your own business, or is it something that from the get-go you guys said, we need to build this for, somebody asked us to do it?
It was really not started out as a business. That's the weird thing about this. Like myself and my co-founder, Carlos, we were running a startup studio at the time. So it's kind of a web design studio that morphed into this kind of business that was helping entrepreneurs build their tech platforms, ultimately, like the first version of those products. And we really felt a bit, I would say, isolated in terms of we didn't really feel at home in a lot of the startup and business events we would go to and the communities we were part of. We got little bits from each of them, but there wasn't really a home where we felt at home, a place where we can go to and felt like people shared our view on business and our values. And so in some ways it was, I guess, a route for us to create that for ourselves. And so it really started out as an idea around what would it look like if we put, purpose and happiness at the heart of entrepreneurship and not just focus on, exits and hockey stick growth, which a lot of people follow as the kind of only way to build a startup. And so that was what fascinated us. And so the community was really not something we set out to do, but naturally by us sharing what we wanted and what we believed was important and our views and opinions on that, other people started to join us on that journey. And so slowly that started to build into a wider community and now sort of global tribe of people who are like-minded in that way.
Interesting. The people that started off and sort of the people that follow you and joined your community, are they like a similar group of people, or are they all walks of life? And I'm always curious about that because I see a lot of, for example, I did Y Combinator Startup School, and I would say 99% are all the same type of person, even if they're from all over the world. They have this mentality of hyper growth, like I'm going to build a business in 30 seconds and sell it in 60 seconds later. And when you start talking to them and you bring up issues, you can see that they don't have that in their systems to say, no, we're just going to go forward. We're going to push through. Whereas other startups associations, I've noticed that some of them are much more organic and they believe in a small growth or small business. And I'm curious about your people that follow you.
Yeah. Well, I suppose Y Combinator has a very clear way of operating in terms of the startups that they want to attract and the model that they follow and the investment that comes their way. And so for them, then that makes sense for the people coming through those programs to be more aligned in that. For us, we always find that difficult. And I certainly find it difficult when people even ask us like, what are the success stories from your community? Because that implies that there's a bunch of winners and probably a bigger bunch of losers, because that's what that model is based on is, there's a few success stories and the rest kind of fall by the wayside. We don't hear about them. With our community, it really is a diverse mix of people and businesses. And so even on the group I was just mentoring, we had someone who's just in their 20s and someone who's in their 50s, and they're all at different walks of life, but at a similar point in their journey of wanting to start something new, something more meaningful for them. And they're building different kinds of businesses as well. So some might want to build a tech business, but lots want to build, I would say, businesses where they're harnessing their knowledge. So there might be consultants or coaches or practitioners who have a body of work behind them, but want to translate that into maybe something more scalable, impactful. And so there's, the common link with all our community, I would say, is this need to contribute, to give back, to share their experience, make use of that, and actually to yeah, to feel like a commitment to something, to another community, or creating their own community in many cases. So I think that's the core part of this, is this desire not just to chase success on their own terms, but actually to do that, in the benefit of society and other people that they want to support.
Very nice. In building this, what was your Carlos, your partner's
Mm.
biggest roadblock? What was the initial biggest roadblock that you guys felt like was this is really hard, and how did you sort of surpass that?
I'd love to say it was something outside, but my first reaction when I hear that is probably me. Which, and the reason I say that is because I know, working with so many entrepreneurs over the years, that it's easy to blame other things like, lack of investment, not enough money, not enough time, the wrong team, COVID. But I often think, when I look back at my journey, the things that limited, our ability to achieve what we wanted was probably, me as an individual. Carlos made the same for me or him. But yeah, I really think that there was some blocks around money, particularly, I think, because we were working with a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, many of whom wouldn't consider themselves, rich. And also that feeling of, well, we can't really charge startups much money because, they don't have much, and therefore they're not going to want to spend it when they don't really know where the next penny or cent is coming in. So there was that aspect to it. And I also just think, in terms of stepping out of one business where there was a defined identity, i.e., I was a designer, we were designing digital products, we were helping people on that journey. So there was a really clear role there. And stepping into this new business where we were not doing the work, but more connecting and mentoring others, and creating a space for others and growing that took a different kind of identity. And so, there's a great book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which I think taps into this idea that, where we get to as a small business owner or as a leader requires a whole different set of skills to go to the next level. And so I think that's, for me, been a lot of learning and growth around leadership, really, and letting go in some ways of, in the past I was a control freak. I still am a little bit, and a recovering perfectionist. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of designers have that, a lot of entrepreneurs have that. But yeah, trying to let go, trying to move forward and let others shine has been a journey for me.
I mean, you've been doing this for 10 years and it feels like your conversation is fresh. So it's something that's ongoing. I think that stays with you for the rest of your life. I don't think that goes away, being perfectionist. So it's interesting. So now looking at the roadblocks, because you guys are in a unique situation of helping and also mentoring other businesses, where do you see other businesses and other startups, the number one roadblock that you see them having?
Yeah. It's really tough on that. There are lots. I mean, one thing I always come back down to is people, in terms of, I really believe it's about building relationships with people. And I think a lot of startups, particularly, I think, don't understand that and learn it later. And I would say that. So in terms of a roadblock, I think it's thinking that everything you need is to do with the quality of your idea or even the execution of it, which is important, obviously. But I really think people are integral to it. And so, part of the reason and reason we do what we do, but also part of the strength I believe in having a community around you, I think, is you surround yourselves with people who can help you either get clear on what you're trying to do, build it, or even scale it or sell it or do whatever you want to do with it. And so, not understanding that at the beginning, thinking it's all about the quality of the idea, how well you execute on it, I think underplays the value of support around you. And ultimately, if you want to build a business, build a brand, build a community, you need people to help you do that. And so whether it's your team, whether it's customers to buy from you, or whether it's board members or people to advise you, I think really building your network and building it not just with people who have built businesses, but people who have built businesses like the one you want to build, and certainly around the way you want to do it, and, around the way you believe business should operate and the values that you think are important. Because ultimately you'll get advice from people who may be good willing, but maybe don't have the right set of values for you. And so that, for me, has been so important, to have role models around me who I can look to and think, yeah, they're ahead of me, and that's inspiring me to do good things. But also having peers around me who we can share the journey with, and share some of those roadblocks and highs and lows together. Because yeah, if you're trapped in your own little bubble, which me and Carlos were when we started our agency many moons ago, thinking we could, do it all without any help. Yeah, I think asking for help is such a big one. So yeah, I would probably say that.
So it's building community, and so this is really interesting. So I also sent you a link to 1,000 First Fans, like which is something that was written out, and I
Mm,
thought it was really brilliant in many ways because I honestly believe a lot of people don't work on that, like you said.
mm.
One of the things I noticed also when I mentored and did years ago was that in startups, most people built the idea and then starting to talk to people, but they would never be able to get the momentum to build
Mm.
a following of people that was going to support them. They're true fans that are going to buy their product or support them. How
Yeah.
would you suggest somebody start today to build their community?
Well, before even saying that, what my response is to that question, the first thing that came to mind is the reframing around talking to people, because like you said, a lot of people build it and then go talk to people. My advice is always talk to them first before you build anything. So that's one thing I think, is just understanding that people have the secrets that you're looking for to unlock, where the value might be. And so in some ways, starting before you're ready to build that community, starting today with one person, finding your first true fan before you even get to 100 or 1,000. So that would be one thing. I think the other thing is just to really start thinking about, what do you have to say. And this is one thing I think a lot of startups miss a trick on, is, we used to work with people building great products, but they didn't really work out what they were trying to say as a brand, as a company. And what I mean by that is not just, oh, we've got all these features that are going to help solve your problem, or, we really care because we're a great company, but actually, why do you exist as a company? What do you stand for? And that for me comes back down to values, and ideally some kind of mission that you're on, because I believe that's what people want to contribute to these days, is not just buy from someone because they solve their problem, but they want to feel connected to something bigger. And so, as I guess a tip, if you want to start building a community, is forget building the product. Just decide what you want to say. And one thing we do on our programs is get people to write a manifesto. And that manifesto is essentially a way to capture their belief system and their ideas of where they want to go, and who they want to come with. And ultimately, that manifesto is a call to arms for people to join them on that journey, some of whom may be customers and some of whom may be people who just love the ethos of what they're about. So for me,
Very
that's a
interesting.
powerful way to just start building a tribe.
Very interesting. So the manifesto is, do you make them do it in such a way that they talk about themselves or only about the product or their journey to the product and then from there on?
So the manifesto itself is essentially, think of it as like, if you were to have a shiny version of it, it would be a poster. It's like, this is your rallying cry to get people to join your movement. It's what we actually did when we started the Happy Startup School. We didn't have a product to sell. We didn't have an event to go to. It was really, we called it our Happy Festo. It was a manifesto based on building a happy business. And so that to me was easy to create, because this was almost like, wouldn't it be great if business looked like this? But we went to work every day and it was fun, and we followed our purpose, and we worked with people we love working with, and we could make a positive dent in the world. And these were the pillars really for our manifesto. And it wasn't clever marketing. It was coming from the heart, and it was coming from a place of wanting to contribute, but also a place of curiosity too, about going, well, who else feels like this? Who else feels like business could look like this? And I want my business to look like this, or maybe it already looks like this. And so within a few weeks of putting that live, we had literally thousands of people pledging their support for this new way of viewing business, which became the sort of foundation for our community today. And so, we've seen this work with lots of other people too. Even the startup who went through Techstars that we got to know, they created a travel storytelling platform, and they did a similar thing. They created a manifesto. They got people to print it out around the world. They would customize it, post it on social media. And this was way before they had any investment or even a product to sell. And so what that did was, it built a story, and it built a brand, and it built a following. So when they were launching, people cared, and people knew who they were and what they're about, and they were curious. And that's part of this, I think, too, is that vulnerability at the beginning. Like I said, before you've got anything ready, before you've got a product, share your ideas, share your vision, and see what happens. Put it out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, that's really smart. I love the manifesto. I know that a lot of people, that's what the first thing they do is they're always told, go and find people, interview them, ask them about your idea before you even build anything. So when you take people, certainly your tribe, and you bring them through your journey, and now they've created their manifesto, what do you feel is their stumbling block in
Yeah, there's
your
definitely.
tribe?
I mean, the next step. So we use the phrase thingifying. I don't think it's in the English dictionary, but it's certainly one we use, which is to turn your ideas into action, not just think them. And I think we're all guilty of having these ideas in our heads that we don't actually do anything with. We see a
Yeah,
product, we're like, oh, I thought of that 10 years ago. I thought of Facebook. So ideas, as we say here, to a penny. Ideas themselves can be useful, but on their own, they're not very much use. So there's no point sitting there with regrets of all these ideas we had that we didn't action. So, we're big fans of thingifying, turning your ideas into things, experiments, mini projects that you can test out. So the manifesto is a great way to start to do that, because that's one way to get your ideas out there. But like you said, other ways are having conversations with customers, getting to understand their world. Creating a simple landing page would be one way of doing it. You can put your manifesto on it, have a way to capture people's email, or maybe send them to a social media platform that you're on where you're starting to share videos or content around this stuff. That's all great, but like you said, I think a big stumbling block is fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being wrong, fear of this not being the right thing. I'm wasting my time doing this when this idea is not going to work. So there's a bit of fear of creating. I think it can be easy to do stuff, in stealth mode, hiding away from the world. And we've worked with so many entrepreneurs in the past who are happy doing that. They're happy, I wouldn't say procrastinating, but certainly just trying to get things perfect, linked to the idea of being perfectionist, because they're scared that when they release it, if it's not perfect, then they'll get called out.
Yeah.
Now, actually, that's more on them than it is on their customers, from my experience. It's often our own view of what perfection looks like. And just to reiterate a story around that, when we were an agency, we used to spend up to 6 months or sometimes up to a year building the first version of a product, like you said, an MVP, or what we call the MLP, minimum lovable product, and have conversations with them about, the big stuff, like what's the product do, who's it for, try and help to test it out with their customers, although many of them were a bit resistant to that for the reasons we talked about. But also we'd have conversations about the color of a button and what we call a button. And often these conversations would go into hours, and then you'd release the product, and often there was a much bigger assumption that was being made about the product that they weren't testing out, or that hadn't been tested out. So the customers didn't care what the button was called or what the color of the button was. What they cared about was how quickly they could solve their problem and get out. Mm-hmm. And so that was just a great reminder to me about not trying to perfect things that don't need perfecting, and certainly doing it at the right time, and really fundamentally testing your assumptions early by talking to customers, testing out ideas with them early, and getting out of your own way by not thinking it has to be perfect, when in fact, sometimes a scrappier version of a product is better early on, because you get more honest feedback from people, rather than spending a year of your life on something and then finding out they don't want to use it, rather than them telling you.
Yeah. I always think of the story of Dropbox that I heard when they first pitched it. It was actually a video that it wasn't even real. He was just mimicking the movement. They sold on that. I think that's the brilliance, is really getting that. I agree. Perfectionism is my problem too. I overthink the ideas and the color of the buttons way more than I ever should. I think it's really common, and I think it's part of procrastination. So I agree with you there. Mm-hmm. Now, I found something really interesting about what you guys did. You also did these sort of getaways, right? These sort of training camps. And you could tell me more about that, because I think that's something I found personally. When I'm in a group of people in a certain setting, I feel energized to go and build and to create. Whereas if I'm in my office by myself, I will feel the need to go and take my dog for a walk, much more than to go back to work.
Yeah.
And so I think there was something when I saw what you guys were doing, I was really interested in that. Could you walk us through a little bit how that came about?
Yeah, I'm a bit like you too. I do love walking my dog, but it is a great way to put off some difficult tasks often. So yeah, I wouldn't define them as training camps. I mean, really, again, going back to how we started at the Happy Startup School, we quickly realized there was something here, right? There was a need here that we were tapping into, not just for ourselves, but to the wider world. And, we've been running our agency for close to 10 years by this point. And within, say, a month of starting the Happy Startup School, we'd had way more interest than we'd had in 10 years of running an agency. And that just blew our minds, because we were like, hey guys, we've been here for ages. No one's really cared about us till now. Going back to my point, we didn't have anything that interesting to say. We thought we were doing great work, and we were to a certain extent, but we were a web design agency. We weren't doing anything cool or sexy. And so suddenly to realize there was people out there who really connected with what we were saying and how we were saying, led us to realizing, let's get together, let's meet these people rather than just have them on our mailing list. And so we did a few meetups, and then we did our first summer camp, which is our now annual festival in the UK. And that was in 2013. The first one was just a day, but then we eventually moved it to a weekend. And yeah, we had 100 people come to that from all around Europe. And that also blew our mind, because we were like, wow, they don't know us. They don't really know what we do, because we don't really have a product. But the ideas and the energy behind it was really powerful. And so that first summer camp gave us the confidence then to do a lot more of these gatherings. And so summer camp is now close to 200 people every September. Obviously, not since COVID's come around, but we're planning for next year. And we've had people come from all around the world from that, from as far as Australia, Brazil, the US, and our community is global. So, naturally we have people who are inspired to get on a plane and come over, but also lots of people can't. And so we've also been on trips to the US and India, and an annual retreat we do in the Alps, which are smaller groups. So we have sort of 20 to 25 people each time on those week-long retreats, and they are more focused on, I would say, the leaders, so people who may be a bit more experienced, to value space. So the reason I say I wouldn't call it a training camp is that sounds like hard work. If you see the photos of these trips, they look like a vacation. And actually there's a bit of both, right? So for the accountant, it's a business trip. for the partners, it's a business trip. But it feels like a vacation. And that's the interesting thing about these retreats. And I think we've done about a dozen of them now in different places. And the one thing I always learn, which I'm trying to feed into my work life now, is just how, when you're not doing work, it doesn't feel like work, but actually the value and the outcomes can be way more powerful than when you think you're doing work. And so I've been on trips where we go to conferences and it's tiring and you don't learn that much, but you have some great conversations in the breaks or in the in-between bits. And so when we designed Altitude, the first retreat we did, our goal with that was really like, what would happen if we created a whole week of the in-between bits and scrap the talk, scrap the rubbish coffee in a kind of stale conference room, and we go to the mountains with a bunch of people who inspire us, and we leave it open to great conversation and food and experiences together, and see what happens. And so that's really how that came about. And so that, for us, really, I think, laid the groundwork for our community. Is these relationships we developed on the ground have then allowed us to grow from that solid base, really, of people who we know and trust, and who can spread the word to those that don't. And that then gives those that find us online more confidence. Like you said, they find photos, they see we are real people doing real things. And that also is, I think it just gives people reassurance that we're not going to be going anywhere anytime soon.
Very interesting. And I like that. Do you feel like those retreats and your business in general is mostly referrals? Is it people talking about you to other people? Or is it you guys actually going out and doing a lot of like social media? Because I don't see you guys doing a lot of social media. So I'm assuming most of your business growth came from referrals.
Yeah.
Am I right?
At the beginning, we were quite active and, using social media as a way to build that initial following, because I think we just needed to be, we felt we had something to say, but also we just wanted to find out, like, where's our time best spent, because we work with so many people who are trying to nail social media, and everyone feels like they need to be on everything. And so they do everything okay or a little bit badly rather than doing one thing well. So over time, I think we've just learned that the more we let go, the more we just don't try, the easier it becomes, which is kind of counterintuitive in some ways. So really for us, referrals is a big thing. Like you said, people come on our trips, they recommend it, or they just talk about it, because they had such a great experience, or they had such an important breakthrough. But also lots of people who've followed us for a long time. I mean, we've had some people who've followed us for like 5 years on our list, and then they come to their first trip or program. And so in some ways it's a really long, sort of slow sales cycle, but the trust is there, right? And so I think, what we found is we're not going to convince someone that what we do is a great idea if they're a bit skeptical. We're not going to try even and educate people about why they need to do this and they're doing it wrong, which to some extent was a bit of the energy when we started, was like, backlash against what existed. Whereas now I'm just like, well, this is what we do. This is how we do it. We believe this is the future, and this is more sustainable, more meaningful, and more connecting. But equally, there's other ways of doing business, and if that works for them, fine. But we're not going to try and bang that drum to people who don't want to listen to it. And so, yeah, that's why we just focus on the people who get us and really cementing those relationships. And hopefully they'll buy something from us. If they don't, no worries. They'll probably talk to us about other people. We've had people who've joined some of our programs are like, oh, so and so talked about you, and we literally don't have any connection to that person, but they feel connected to us. So that's part of the beauty of online, I think, is you have that ability to reach people you maybe never meet.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. That's actually a really good point, is that how much of your business comes from just people talking about it. Like, for example, we met just on LinkedIn. That's all. We've
Mm.
talked several times, and then on Clubhouse we've also met up. But in terms of your business, I've talked about your business to a lot of other people. So it
Mhm.
is something that translates really well. And speaking of that, how would you tell somebody who's starting up a new business, and then we'll take a service and just a basic service, to go off and create their tribe before they go and join a service like yours? Where would you tell them, hey, go and look at these places? Like one of what my past guests talked about, local business associations. Pre-COVID, that works when you can go physically in person to meet people. But
Mm.
today, in the past year, with you guys doing most of your business online, what would you say is the number one place for people to go and meet?
Whew. That's really tough because, well, I'm not sure I have as much visibility as I'd like on what else exists because, like you said, it can be so localized. There's some amazing initiatives that happen where I'm based in Brighton in the UK. They're really niche. And I think that's important to maybe think about. I'm a big fan of niche communities rather than big communities, and I think that's where the world is heading. There's a lot of noise out there, and so in some ways, really understanding like who is your tribe is the work to do. And so in some ways, I would say experiment with it. Number one, so really try and just go to a meetup, virtual or otherwise. If you're starting to do in person things, pop along to them and just see where do you fit in. Who's talking your language. The other aspects and point I'd make is maybe just doing the opposite of what you think you should do. And by that, I mean, I'm a big fan of serendipity. And I really believe sometimes we're better off going to things that are way outside of our comfort zone, that are way outside of our normal industry, because you might actually learn something there. And so, I've been to conferences on things that aren't related to, entrepreneurship or design or anything like that. And actually, it's got my brain whirring in a different way. Went to ballet with my wife the early last year, and it's not something I'd ever done before. And I just started to think way more creatively about this whole new discipline I was encountering. And there's a great book called The Medici Effect where they talk about this. They call it the intersection, and they say basically if you want to start a new initiative, head into the intersection. And by the intersection, they mean a place where new ideas, new culture, or not new ideas, so ideas, cultures, and backgrounds come together to create this random melting pot. And often you get that from something that's not your natural place to play in. And for me, that was ballet that time. For other people, it might be another environment. But I really believe that's this magic of diversity and serendipity comes from stepping into that intersection, which is kind of what our retreats are really in some ways. They are this melting pot of people from different countries, different walks of life, different perspectives, and just seeing what happens when that comes out of it. So yeah, maybe a mix of the two, finding your tribe and then probably stepping out your comfort zone and feeling a little uncomfortable is always good.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's didn't think about that. That's a good point. In when you're doing this, when you're going off and you're basically mentoring these people through the business cycle, and you're talking about their tribe, do you feel there's a pushback from people who feel like, well, you know what, I only want to deal with people around me, or I don't feel comfortable. When you encounter that, when you encounter resistance from the people, how do you get them to sort of say, no, open your eyes or open your heart to something new? Is it something you struggle with, or is it something that most of the people that have signed up are already accepting and saying, I'm willing to try anything. I'm going to go to India and go and dance on the street to meet new people kind of thing? Or is it,
Yeah.
I find a lot of people just stay close. I'll give an example where we'd have a meetup, and I would say about 90% of the people would not say a word,
Mm.
never say goodbye, never say hello, just sit there, listen, and leave as though they were just like, we were a movie. And then there was a few people that you couldn't get them to stop talking. And I found it a really strange thing where you came all this way to sit down just to listen and leave without interacting. So is that something you noticed a lot with the people?
I would say maybe at the start, we used to run a design event in London before we started the Happy Startup School, and it grew to like a good 100 people every month, and it was a good event. But like you said, it was more of an experience there was a passive experience. So people would come, get value from it, but only a few would stick around for a chat afterwards. Lots came for free pizza. But I also think it's, there might be something about how an event is hosted. I'm not saying you do any differently, but just in terms of what outcome you want to create. And so what we've learned to do over the years is really to host in a way that creates the most engagement from the most amount of people. And, at our summer camp, we have a bunch of talks, but most of the interactions with people are in, conversations in spaces where they can show up and actually be encouraged to contribute. We even have an open space day where anyone can run a workshop or a talk. And so, I think it's just understanding what's the goal of any event like that, or what's the goal of the community. And we're big fans of having a level playing field where it's not like, one person on stage like in TED and everyone else has come to learn this wisdom. There's a bit of that. Obviously, we want to learn from role models, but also we found so many people in the audience who have amazing stories to share, amazing wisdom to share. And so I think our role is actually to surface those, not just, these kind of maybe superheroes who seem to have done a lot with their businesses, and actually see, what's the kind of, diamond in the rough as well. Who are the people out there who aren't talking about what they do, but have great stories to share. So
Yeah.
I think that's one part of that, is somehow getting the choir to step up. And that's always a danger, not danger, but like a challenge.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I went to an event in 2019, just near fall, just around that time, and I remember getting to it, and I was expecting it just to be a conversation with this on marketing, and it was held at this place. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of like almost like a school area setup, but the host turned every chair around in a big circle, and so we sat down, and in the center was the guest, and basically the guest gave his 5 minute speech about what he was going to do, and he says, "Okay, now everybody, tell me something about yourself." But I think that's brilliant, is to get people out of their comfort zone. We never did that in the meetups. We would just sort of let people sit there. But I realized you probably would get a lot more from forcing people into being able to speak.
Yeah,
And
and run meetups like that. We will get people into little groups of like 6 to 8 people. And we have this format called Ideas Cafe, which is that we would get people into small groups, and you're not feeling like you have to talk to a big room, which is scary, and having a microphone shoved in your face. But actually, I think people come to connect and belong. I believe, and so yes, they come to learn about things. But ultimately, if they come away feeling like they've met one person or they've been heard, then I think they can feel good about themselves, and they'll probably want to come back. So, that works for us in terms of building community, because, as I said, there's not one person with the answers. Each of us has something to contribute, and so however you can do that to facilitate in a way that builds that community, not just you to them, but also them to each other, I think it's so important. The other thing I just wanted to touch on was what you said before about, breaking out of their comfort zone a bit to talk to people. I think you're saying something about potential customers. What we try and do is get people to step from like maybe one-to-one. So ideally, if they've got a coach or mentor like me, they would give them some clarity on their ideas. Then maybe in our small group, so we have these groups of 6 to 8 people, again, building confidence with their ideas, sharing it, talking to people about it. And then from there, they can share it with our wider community, or even share it on social media, LinkedIn, or to their own community, and start to talk to customers that way. So in some ways, trying to build, confidence in their ideas to the point that they feel comfortable sharing it with more and more people, rather than just, ta-da, this is my business, it's ready to go, come and get me world. Just ironing out any chinks in it, and also just feeling good about sharing and the feedback they get from it.
really cool. That's great. So last question before I get to the wraparound questions. At what point do you suggest people to come and join your school?
I mean, I'm just a fan. Like I said before, start before you're ready. So like, some people come to us when they've got an idea and they want to move forward. Other people don't have an idea, but they know that something's missing, and everyone can get value from what we do. We have an online community which is super affordable. There's lower commitment. People can join that for like $30 a month. Lots of people do that as a way to just get a feel for how we operate and the kinds of people they would meet. With our program specifically, there seems to be a point at which most people are at, which I think is less about the business and the idea they've got, more about where they are at as individuals. And it's really about being at a turning point, a crossroads in their life. Often, we hosted a show on this last week about late bloomers, and late bloomers being not just you get to your mid-40s, have a midlife crisis, and then want to change something. Late bloomers being something that can happen to you at any age. It could be something you get. I had it at 22 when I was working in the city of London, and I was feeling totally disillusioned by the thought of working in that environment for the rest of my life. So a lot of people we meet are at that point. They've been working and they just feel like something's missing. And they could have been running their own business too. We work with lots of people who've run their own business, but they've got to a point where actually they're not enjoying it anymore. It's not fun anymore. It's become work. It's just somewhere to go to get paid and go home. And they put everyone else's needs before their own. Maybe it's their team or colleagues. So yeah, I think really it's about people wanting to make a change, a positive change, and wanting to do something positive, something impactful for themselves and for others, and being open to that. Because I think, like you said, in terms of the biggest shift we can make is with people who are ready for that, rather than those who maybe everything's fine, business is working well, so why would you be receptive to some of these ideas? So I think this really works well when people have had some kind of, I'm not going to say epiphany moment, but some kind of moment where they just feel like, right, now's the time to change, and
yeah,
be on that road.
I see that, and I guess also when they have a roadblock where they just feel like they can't get around it themselves, I'm sure your services will be able to help them get that. Certainly in a group setting, sometimes it's just really obvious the answer, but when you're by yourself in your office, you just keep spinning the same wheel. So
yeah,
the hamster wheel, they call
the
it.
best analogy I've heard of I think talks to the kind of people we work with is David Brooks wrote this book called The Second Mountain, and it talks to the people who are doing that. And by the second mountain, he means, the first mountain is typically those who are on the path to traditional measures of success. So it'd be, trying to get a good job, get a good career, have a family, get a nice house, all the things that we are told we want or should want and need from a young age, good education. But so many people climb that mountain and it feels hollow, or they don't even want to go up the mountain because they've realized that they want to take a different route. And so the second mountain really talks to those who want to focus on, commitment to something, commitment to a cause or to a mission and to a community. And so that's what I believe is a much more enriching journey. It's not an easy one because it takes courage and, often stepping out of a traditional career or even walking away from money. Sometimes people have to take a salary cut to do this. And that can be hard, particularly if you have responsibilities, and that can feel indulgent or selfish.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we don't want anyone to die with regrets or to feel like they've missed a trick or not followed that urgency to create something. So that's where the community comes in, I think, is to pick people up when they're down and give them those guide ropes to use to go forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's great. All right. So now we're going to do the rapid questions. So we're going to start off with, and you talked a lot about books. I want to know, what is your number one book you suggest every entrepreneur to read?
Oh, well, that Second Mountain book's a good one. I'm not going to say it's my number one book to read, but the book I'm probably going to say is one that inspired us to create the Happy Startup School, which was Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. Tony Hsieh passed away last year, very sadly. He's the founder of Zappos, or Zappos, I'm never quite sure how you say it. But his whole ethos really inspired us, the idea that you could make happiness your business model. You could build $1 billion business, in his case, by having these really strong core values around creating a really happy environment for yourself, for your team, and for your customers. And so, I think that book still stands up to this day. That, along with The Lean Startup, were two books we read just before we started the Happy Startup School. And one gave us this kind of real sense of people, and Tony Hsieh's book being that. And then Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup, really just about, creating new ideas and launching them and how to do that in an effective way. And so those two, for us, made sense for us to then start our business called the Happy Startup School, because it was bringing those two worlds together.
Brilliant. I love it. So next question. What is your one device you can't live without?
The one I'm using at the moment, my MacBook Pro, I think would be my,
Excellent.
yeah, I don't know how I would survive. It's my world in terms of, creating, connecting, everything. So yeah, I'll be happy to lose my phone. I'm not, it's handy, but I also have a love-hate relationship to it. So I'm definitely going to say my laptop.
I can't live without my phone. It's the funniest thing. It's just, that's one thing. If I feel like I'm missing it, I'm always patting myself down. If I where did I leave it? So it's funny. It's become such a part of me. It's like my keys, my phone, my wallet,
I know.
it's weird.
Terrible.
So how do you manage stress? And I assume in a happy school, most people think like you guys are like just there's no stress, but I'm sure there's a lot of stress. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, we're entrepreneurs. We're running a community. It's it's not all unicorns and rainbows by far from it. So for me personally, outdoors is my kind of sacred space. So I have a dog. Like you, go out. I'm lucky to live by the sea and up near the countryside where I am. So yeah, particularly during lockdown, the last 12 months over here, it's been good to have that on my doorstep. And so yeah, I would probably say trying to walk away from a problem is my kind of mantra, which is hard to do. If you're feeling stressed and things aren't working and you're forcing it, I just have to remind myself that actually just go out, just go for a walk. Every problem I've ever faced has always felt lighter after I've gone for a walk. But it's at the moment where it's at its worst that you have to keep reminding yourself of that, because it feels so counterintuitive to go do it, because we're just taught to sit there and solve a problem. But yeah, I can
Yeah, I
talk
agree though.
talk to myself about that sometimes. As go get out the building, as Eric used to say.
I laugh because I talked to my dog about it, and I'm sure people think like, "What is this guy doing?" But I find it so much nicer just walking and just talking it out in your head. Yes, and yeah, it's
He's,
really good.
he-
He is. He tells me off when he thinks it's a bad idea. Well, I assume, anyways. Um, Anyways, I want to thank you very much, Lawrence, for your time. It was amazing. I learned a lot from you, and we're going to be able to get all of your links and what you put up
cool.
on our transcript. So thank you again, and it was a pleasure having you.
Thanks, Oliver. It's been a pleasure.